Hi
Okay.
Tristan, thanks for taking the time for
Yeah.
making an interview. We're talking about digitization, and at first I would like to have if you would complete the sentence, what's your hope for digitization?
My hope for digitization is that we focus as the technology industry on making sure that we're strengthening the social fabric and strengthening the bonds and the coordination capacity of humanity. So as opposed to trying to crawl down people's brain stems and get things out of them, that we instead ask, there's this thing called the social fabric, which includes our relationships, democracy, shared truth, mental health, romantic relationships. All of that are part of this invisible ecology, almost like an environment. And what I'm excited about is for technology to be humane or wrap around those parts of the social fabric and fit them like a glove. Because right now, technology is designed to fit our lizard brain like a glove. Like it wants to, climb onto your amygdala, your fear center, and wrap perfectly around that, or wrap around your dopamine slot machine reward center. That's fine, but it's causing all these other problems. So it's not that we don't want technology or we don't want to digitize. We want to digitize and make more efficient all the things that stand between us and the things that make us extra human. I mean, one of the lines we use is we don't want technology that makes us superhuman. We want to bring out what makes us extra human. So that's what I think we need to do.
Yeah. And the biggest fear, to come to the opposite scenario?
Well, the opposite scenario, which unfortunately is also the default scenario, is kind of doom, just to be clear, because I think what people need to get is, having technology that gets better and better and more persuasive at overpowering the limits of the human mind. When I say that, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, like I have a tinfoil hat. But when you realize that, when I was a kid, I was a magician, and it teaches you that you can have an asymmetric amount of power over someone else's experience without them realizing it. You can overpower the limits of someone's mind. And technology, especially with AI, is going to get better and better at knowing your weaknesses better than you know yourself. And once it does that, it can take control. Like that, think about it, to military actors. If I'm a military actor and I know your plans and your weaknesses better than you know your weaknesses, which one wins? So we have a supercomputer every day pointed at 2 billion people's brains called Google and Facebook. And we're bringing the same Paleolithic hardware from millions of years ago, so it's like bringing a knife to a space laser fight. The default outcome will be bad because we will lose control of our mental sovereignty. And democracy is based on that, and shared truth is based on that, and so we're debasing the fundamental substrate of what makes our society work if we don't fix this problem. So
that's the race of attention you're talking about.
Yes, the race for attention comes from the advertising business model because, Herbert Simon said in the 1970s that when information gets abundant, attention gets scarce. It used to be that there was a competition for who has more information because information was not abundant. It was hard to get access to information. And the internet came along and it just exploded information. And then that has to fit in a finite pool of attention that's called the attention economy. And there's only so much. It takes 9 months to grow a new human being to plug them into the attention economy. So it becomes what we call the race to the bottom of the brainstem. That I have to go lower into your brainstem than my competitor, otherwise I won't get as much attention from them. And so it becomes this not just race to the bottom of the brainstem, but it's a race to frack attention. Because it's, for example, when we start running out of attention, we want you to start paying attention to 2 or 3 things or 4 things at once, because then we can quadruple the size of the attention economy to sell that to advertisers. But what we're selling to advertisers is crappier, worse, smaller time slices of attention, more and more like fake slices of attention to advertisers, and meanwhile we're fracking our brains, and the average time that we spend focused on a computer screen is 40 seconds. And that was 2 years ago. It's getting worse. We can't read critical books anymore. We're losing nuance and complexity, and the world's getting more and more complex. And we're thinking simpler and simpler thoughts. We're saying simpler and simpler things about a more and more complex world. And this is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. And this combined with the idea of that it's possible to hack the human brain and the attention and the emotions. So you
Yeah.
really think this is possible, that tech can hack a human being?
Yeah. Yes, it can tech hack a human being. I think people like to think, oh, it's unfortunate those dumb people over there that they got affected by Russian propaganda, or those people over there got sucked into YouTube, but not me. You and I, we're here in front of this castle. We're the smart ones. Only those people will get affected. In magic, I was a sleight of hand magician. There's a saying that usually the people who have PhDs are easiest to manipulate because they're so confident. And magic doesn't operate at the level of what you know, like your intelligence. How can a 12-year-old magician fool a PhD in astrophysics? It's because it's not about the PhD. It's about something about how your mind works. And our feelings are increasingly hackable. I knew of a group during the French elections, I later found out about this group, that was manipulating the election by looking at your public social media profile posts about a controversial topic, let's say immigration. And let's say you use words like, it's a disgrace, or these animals, or whatever words you were using, they would generate content that matched your own word choices. So you would perfectly nod your head because someone was telling you the exact thing that you want to hear. There's also a persuasive trick, by the way. If you start nodding your head, other people start nodding their head.
It works.
It works. And so we don't even know how we're affected. It's because we have so little self-knowledge that we've really created this runaway system that is pulling on the puppet strings of 2 billion people. So if this is the ant colony of humanity, it's got 2 billion people on it. We're tilting, this digital Frankenstein is tilting the playing field in all these crazier directions, and we have to stop it.
Yeah. Is there an ethical way to steer the thoughts and emotions of billions of people?
Well, I think the thing about this question is people have to realize it's not as if Google can't influence. Meaning, can you tell Google, hey, please stop influencing all of people's thoughts and all of people's actions? You can't ask them to do that. It's impossible. The search results page will preference certain results and not others by definition. So that means that some search results will win, which means those will influence people, and others will influence them less. So it's the same thing with YouTube and these other things. So we have to actually have a model for how do you ethically influence people's thoughts, and that involves aligning the incentives between those who are designing the technology and those who are using it, and waiting for people to bring their own values to the table as opposed to technology trying to crawl down your brainstem and hijack your values. The biggest way to ethically influence people's thoughts, or what I call ethical persuasion, is to make sure that the persuader's goals are aligned with the persuadee. That's like a psychotherapist who cares about the result for you, or a children's developmental psychologist who, with a child, cares about that child's development. So it's that kind of nurturing, steward-like relationship, stewardship, custodianship, that kind of relationship that we need.
So this sounds like it's aggressive against democracy.
Yeah, well,
The danger for democracy.
democracy is based on the idea that human thoughts and feelings are the foundation for how we crowdsource sense-making and choice-making. And if in a world where you can, at mass scale, not at a shallow level, but at a deep level, manipulate people's thoughts and feelings, as Russia did in the United States, for example, and now I know the playing field, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, China are all now realizing how cheap it is. The joke was that for less than the cost of an F-35, the Russia was able to massively influence the U.S. election, reaching more than 126 million Americans, which is more than 90% of the U.S. voting population. If we don't have sovereign beliefs or thoughts through conversation with facts and shared truth, that's the end of democracy. And in Yuval Harari's words, who's a close friend of mine, democracy becomes an emotional puppet show, where it's just about playing with and manipulating the feelings. And this is a really big deal because the democratic system is based on the customer is always right, the voter knows best, and this is what we have to preserve and figure out how do we protect and strengthen the foundation of what we think and feel. And we have to really develop that as a field.
Is that something the users themselves can fix, or is there a need for regulation and the politics to wake up, or is it something that the companies should do themselves with self-binding ethical rules?
Well, it certainly can't be done just by individual action, because it's like trying to solve climate change by turning off your light bulbs or buying a Tesla. It would be great if we all did that, but individual action is nowhere close to enough. In the case of climate change, the top 100 companies make up 71% of emissions. So in the case of social climate change, which we call human downgrading, which is the climate change of culture, it's downgrading all these facets of human life, mass human downgrading. It can only be solved by changing these business models, and that has to be done at the regulatory level. The point is that we have to change it from the top. We have to change the business models of these companies, and that involves policymakers and likely reclassing them from being in a contract peer-to-peer relationship with people to being in a fiduciary relationship that acknowledges that these companies have asymmetric power. They have privileged access to information about you that could be used to extort you, the same level and degree to which a priest or a lawyer or a psychotherapist or a doctor has that level of asymmetry. So the line is that Silicon Valley tends to defend itself to Congress using neoliberal economics, but they run their companies based on behavioral economics, behavioral manipulation, which is the admission that they have asymmetric power to manipulate you. But then they tell Congress, we actually have a equal relationship with our users. They're consciously choosing to consent. And so this is the fallacy that has to be fixed. And as soon as you fix that fallacy, it means that they can't have the advertising business model. Because the advertising business model would be like a doctor whose entire business model is to sell you whatever will maximize their revenue instead of what's good for you, given the sensitivity of that relationship.
But can there be a kind of ethical advertising model? What's about the future of these companies?
Yeah, well, the future of the advertising model is going to be deeply made in question by these changes. I will say on a spectrum, advertising that treats you with dignity as a conscious agent that is trying to live your life on your own terms is closer to the advertising in Google search, which might be controversial to some, but I think is on the better side of advertising compared to advertising that says, I don't even know who you are or what you are. My entire job is to crawl down your brainstem and manipulate you and get you using this for as long as possible and tilting the playing field towards conspiracy theories. That engagement advertising, which is trying to get your attention, is the big problem. And that's the thing that we really have to shut down.
Okay, so we wish you all the best and good ideas to fix that.
Thank you.